Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to be able to rise in this House today and speak in support of a balanced budget. Madam Speaker, not that long ago, I had the privilege of standing in this House and addressing the throne speech. And at that time, I pointed out that while our current throne speech outlines some very bold vision, some really imaginative opportunities for British Columbia, things that can spell out our future in an entirely different way, I pointed out that a similar thing had happened. A similar thing had happened a little more than a decade previous, when the government had outlined a strategy to diversify our economy, rely less on U.S. trade, and through that, institute the work and investment in the Pacific Gateway and achieve those goals in terms of the diversification of our economy. And Madam Speaker, although at the time those aspirations were met with great skepticism, nevertheless, we achieved them. And as I look at the plan that the budget supports, so we have the throne speech with its aspirations for the future, we have a budget that is the foundation for that. Why is that? Well, Madam Speaker, as I pointed out in my throne speech comments, you cannot simply wave your hand and arrive at the situation you wish to be in. You have to plan for it. And Madam Speaker, I dare say that had there not been the kind of fiscal management that was required in the last 10 or more years, there is no way that we would be producing a balanced budget in this year. It's because of the type of work we have already done. And as I proceed with my comments, I'll be able to share why that becomes so important in understanding this budget and in understanding the initiatives that are undertaken within it. In my own ministry, Madam Speaker, there are some excellent examples. Since 2001, we've invested well over $11 billion in highway improvements across British Columbia. When it came to the Pacific Gateway Alliance, together with industry, $22 billion was committed to expand port, rail, roads, and airport facilities. So what are the results of that? Well, the results of that are major infrastructure already completed, or in some cases, just about to be complete within the coming year. Infrastructure that fundamentally changes the patterns of travel, of day-to-day life of commuters. But Madam Speaker, perhaps more importantly, when we think about growing the economy, opens up British Columbia to a completely new opportunity in terms of goods movement and the transportation of those across not only the Lower Mainland region, but all over the province of British Columbia, taking advantage of the fact that we are 3 days closer to Asia, taking advantage of the fact that around the globe, industry is looking for more and better ways to achieve efficiencies and therefore improve their own economic viability. Madam Speaker, that was only possible because decisions were made early on to approach budgeting in a certain way, to recognize that whenever one makes a budget as government, you have two choices. You can grow government or you can grow the economy. And I would say, in my view, the two are mutually exclusive. If one chooses that growing government is the way to achieve their ends, one might be sincere, but Madam Speaker, I don't think they will achieve them. At the end of the day, government doesn't have its own money. And so there are two choices. You get it from the public in terms of taxes, or you can get it from revenues in terms of economic development around the province. I don't think anyone would argue that they wish to pay more taxes. And certainly, difficult choices have to be made at times to gather more taxation from the public. But it should always be done with the greatest of hesitation and the greatest deal of caution. Madam Speaker, as a result of the careful decisions that have been made and the work that has been done not just across government, But in reality, across British Columbia, British Columbians each and every day deal with the results of our decisions here, and it's in partnership with them that we have reached a place that most governments around the globe are envious of today with this budget. Madam Speaker, as a result of that, we still will see investment in infrastructure in this province, and I'm pleased that when I look at the budget plan, the service plan for the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, we're recognizing that even in difficult times, we cannot pull back from the investment in infrastructure that is going to help to continue to grow our economy at a time when other economies around the world are looking at declines in their economic growth. It's a key piece of this budget, and it's a key feature of the work that we have been doing in British Columbia over these many years and intend to continue to do with the presentation of this budget. Let's look at a few of the investments and the importance of them. The Port Mann Highway 1 South Fraser Perimeter Road projects, they are due to be complete in December. Those projects are moving ahead. They are already making a significant difference on the Lower Mainland of British Columbia, but they will certainly, when complete, provide an even more comprehensive solution to the traffic issues that are being faced there. But Madam Speaker, make no mistake about it. It's not just about Lower Mainland transportation. It's also about the network that allows goods movement, freight movement, all across our province. Investments that are coming, investments that are planned, the Trans-Canada and Highway 1, widening that from Kamloops to the Alberta border. And Madam Speaker, I'm pleased that we were able to announce the tendering of the next phase of the Pritchard Hoffman's Bluff project. We're moving ahead. We're moving ahead with the projects that will allow that four-laning. And overall, we have $650 million allocated over the next 10 years. And again, this brings us back to what's the record of achievement? Back in the day when we first started talking about the widening of Highway 1 and the building of the Port Mann, 10-year project, skepticism, never going to get it done. It's never going to happen. Madam Speaker, it happened. In this case, I call to our record when people say, I don't think you're going to do it. Construction's already beginning on portions, and we will continue to advance that project because we know that it's a key corridor, not just for those local areas and for the safe travel of the public who live there, but also because it's a key goods movement corridor for British Columbia. The Caribou Connector, the Okanagan Valley Corridor, priority rural highway corridors such as 2, 3, 16, 97 North, all of which are addressed in our capital plan in this budget. In an overarching way, we're investing $518 million over the course of this fiscal plan in road rehab over the next 3 years. We're investing $150 million to rehabilitate interior and rural side roads, and $92 million to improve roads impacted by the mountain pine beetle harvest. We'll also invest $20 million in each of 2013-14 and 2014-15 for the oil and gas rural road improvements. All of these investments, Madam Speaker, are investments we're able to make because we have been prudent and careful over the years that we have been managing the provincial purse. Of course, there are many people who would say, well, that's great, you're investing in roads, but it's really important that we advance cleaner travel, that we advance the opportunities for public transit. And Madam Speaker, we're investing there as well, significant investments. Over the next 3 years, our service plan calls for over $836 million of provincial investment in transit infrastructure. We've committed $586 million to the Evergreen Line, and our service plan calls for $364 million for rapid transit buses and other transit priorities over the next 3 years. For those who should be a button. For those who live outside of the Lower Mainland, they'll be more familiar with BC Transit. And I'm pleased to say, Madam Speaker, that BC Transit will see a 22% increase in their operating budget over the next 3-year period. We're also going to continue to work with our federal partners, with TransLink, to achieve the goals that we have in the provincial transit plan and make sure that we are constantly able to respond to the growth not only in the Lower Mainland, but the needs of communities outside of urban centres. Then there's BC Ferries, Madam Speaker. Very, very challenging. Changing travel patterns, increasing demands for service, isolated communities that need to have basic service levels, and yet, Madam Speaker, really challenged by low utilization rates in many areas. And we've been involved in a significant consultation with the public. We've asked them to provide us with insight that goes beyond the numbers, beyond the utilization rates, tells us something of the importance of ferries and the services to their communities, so that when we make the difficult decisions we're going to be faced with, we're making those through the lens of the needs of the community, beyond just the numbers. What does it cost us? How many people ride them? And Madam Speaker, we understand that we need to be there as a provincial government to support those communities who would never be able to afford ferry fares at all were there not a provincial contribution. I'm pleased to say, Madam Speaker, that last year we allocated an additional $79 million in funding over 4 years to BC Ferry Services, and over the 3-year fiscal plan coming, the province will provide total funding of $525 million to BC Ferries. That's a huge amount of money, Madam Speaker, and yet we know that there will still be struggles as we seek to make sure that BC Ferries remains affordable for families, runs an efficient operation, and provides the services that people will need. All of these are difficult choices, Madam Speaker, but the only way that you get to make them is if you have the fiscal wherewithal to achieve the investments that you need. That means that we have to consider the ways in which we can assist families and invest in them as well. Infrastructure is one thing, but families, our people, are our greatest human resource. And if we're not investing in them, we aren't going to get very far. And I was pleased, Madam Speaker, to note that there are a number of initiatives in this budget that address that directly. First of all, the BC Training and Education Savings Grant. I think a very innovative idea. Wasn't that long ago that government announced that it was putting the money away for infants who were born in British Columbia. And that money has been accruing savings. And it's time that British Columbia families enjoyed that. I'm very pleased to see the approach that has been taken here, because it truly puts the decisions in the hands of families. Very important, I think. Again, it gets to that choice as to whether or not you want to grow government or grow the economy. And in this case, helping to grow the economy by supporting families. Their choices. So for BC residents whose children are turning 6, they will be able to receive the one-time $1,200 grant toward a registered education savings plan, and that will allow them to leverage even further benefits through the way in which RESPs operate, such that they would have significant savings, each and every one of those children, by the time that they wish to use that, hopefully for their post-secondary training. It could be for apprenticeships, for trades, it could be for university. But nevertheless, Madam Speaker, a very practical way of helping families, investing in families, indeed investing in our future. The new BC Early Childhood Tax Benefit, another one that I think is innovative in its approach. So many times we see governments come out with grant programs that tend to target a particular activity or behavior of families. And instead here we've said, we're not going to be the ones making the choice for a family as to whether or not they are at home and delivering childcare in that manner, or if they are accessing childcare outside of the home. We have said, here is the credit that you will receive, and we know that you as parents who value your children, value their education, their future, we know that you are going to make the choices in the best interests of those children. Takes another amount of pressure off families by providing them with some additional financial help. And then there's the early years strategy, because of course you need a number of different initiatives to try and address the very comprehensive nature of dealing with the advancement of children and families in this province, indeed in any place. The early years strategy not only invests $76 million over 3 years to support the creation of new childcare spaces, but included within this is $32 million that will support the creation of new childcare spaces. 37 will improve the quality of services available. Very important. I know at times when I have had the opportunity to speak with families who are struggling to find childcare, struggling to find quality childcare, it's something that beyond the cost, just trying to make sure that they have the best possible childcare service for their offspring is incredibly challenging. Anything we can do to improve that for parents, improve that for children, again, is a valuable investment in our society, and it's one that is so keenly important for us to continue in spite of difficult economic times. But there are other types of initiatives that become important. No government can simply pay attention to the particular issues of investing in road and transit infrastructure and looking at investments in care for children. There are other things that have to occur as well. We have to look broadly at our community and see where those investments are needed. $60 million in new funding for the Sports and Arts Legacy Fund. Very important in my community, Madam Speaker. I know that there are small groups all over the province, I see them certainly in my riding in Langley, who volunteer their time to make sure that arts groups, that sports groups are able to be operating and active in communities. It's huge for the fabric of our local communities. It keeps kids engaged and active. It introduces them to the arts, and it makes our communities vibrant. Very, very important investment. An additional $52 million over the 3 years for increased RCMP policing costs. Very challenging times we've had in navigating the challenges we face in terms of safety and security in communities, and big decisions around whether or not communities wish to see RCMP service or independent local police agencies. But fundamentally, Madam Speaker, the fact is we all want to see our communities be safe. And I'm very proud of the work that our Attorney General has done and others who participated in the RCMP negotiations. Very difficult and trying, but nonetheless, Madam Speaker, at the end of the day, what they've managed to do is increase the safety of our communities and make sure that they're supporting those initiatives with a budget that can do that. An additional $18 million for the BC Creative Futures. This again is something that I am applauding because it's innovative, and whenever you can undertake initiatives that will increase the participation of youth in the arts, I think again you're doing something to build for the future of local communities, but also the future of youth who can find oftentimes a very satisfactory career and interest in the arts, and something again that adds to the fabric of our society. $20 million to provide carbon tax relief for commercial greenhouse vegetable and flower growers. I know in my riding, I've heard from a number of constituents who really applauded this initiative. They understand that there is a need for us to pay attention to matters like climate change, like conservation, clean air, clean water, but at the same time, it was becoming very, very hard for them to understand why we would be applying the same type of tax regime to an industry that, of course, is required to produce CO2 in order to make their plants grow. So, Madam Speaker, that is one that I certainly applaud, because we need to be always taking a look at the exceptions to the rule and understanding that not everybody's circumstances are the same. Very, very important. Then, of course, there is the exemption for coloured motor fuel. And I note that the Minister of Agriculture is very, very pleased about these initiatives. He seems to be even more pleased than the farmers and greenhouse growers that I've met. That's good. He has been quite a champion for those industries, obviously bedrock industries in British Columbia, while we advance our work in terms of developing British Columbia's vast natural resources. We can never do that at the expense of our ability to produce food. As one of our former colleagues used to say, you have to eat to live. And that means we have to be paying attention to the health of our agricultural sector, and I think these initiatives go an awful long way to doing that. But, Madam Speaker, I would be not telling the full story of this budget if I only talked about the new spending initiatives. Now, for anyone, whether you're a government, you're a parent, you're a business owner, in whatever role you play, it's always much nicer to be the person coming with a gift, coming with something to provide to someone. That's always a nicer position to be in. It's not the happiest occasion when one has to charge for something, or when one has to be the bearer of bad news. And unfortunately, anytime one wants to talk about raising taxes, you're indeed the bearer of bad news. Nobody wants to pay more taxes. But, Madam Speaker, we've recognized in this budget that there is a balance to be struck, and that balance is not just with respect to the bottom line of the budget. That balance is in terms of the relative amounts that you spend and the relative amounts, or relative to the amounts that you collect. And, Madam Speaker, we made the difficult decision to raise the general corporate income tax rate to 11% from the current 10%. A difficult decision to make, and one that I think we all knew would not necessarily be received with open arms and cheers. But nevertheless, Madam Speaker, goes back to these difficult decisions. Do you grow government? Do you grow the economy? What I am cognizant of, Madam Speaker, is that in spite of this increase, nevertheless, and this goes back to the results of the work that has been undertaken over the last 10 or more years to keep our tax rates competitive. In fact, Madam Speaker, began by reducing them, maintaining their competitiveness. And I'm pleased that even with this 1% increase, we still remain extremely competitive, not just within Canada, within North America, but certainly when you look around the world. There's also a 2-year increase in the personal income tax rate for individuals earning more than $150,000. Those will increase by 2.1 percentage points. Ultimately, they'll be 16.8%. Madam Speaker, again, as a result of the tax reductions over quite a number of years in British Columbia and then maintaining those low rates, we still have the lowest personal income tax rate for people who are earning under those amounts and very competitive above those. So, Madam Speaker, not a pleasant thing to have to raise those taxes, but I think in the context of the world fiscal situation, in the context of British Columbia's fiscal situation, I think a very balanced approach, and one that seeks to be very pragmatic about how it is we manage going forward. Increasing taxes on tobacco, well, back in the day when I used to smoke, I might have been upset about that, but Madam Speaker, I have to say that the $2 a carton rise, what I've heard from my constituents and people roundabout is that they'd certainly welcome that, and they see it as not only something that will help the budget, but also something that will further discourage people from taking up smoking, in particular young people who, of course, are more challenged by the finances. And incidentally, I understand that we still maintain the lowest rate of smoking amongst youth in all of Canada, and I think that's an achievement we can be very, very proud of. So, Madam Speaker, once again, initiatives on both sides. Initiatives of new spending in areas where it's important for us to maintain investment, and then at the same time, initiatives in small ways, nevertheless, initiatives that engage in further taxation and raising revenue in that regard. Of course, we have important things aside from aside from transportation infrastructure to invest in, there's also, of course, the investments that we will be seeing in continued expansion of schools, hospitals, and other infrastructure all across the province. That's expected to total another $10.4 billion. And of course, that brings us to, what does your credit rating mean and why does it matter? I have to admit, Madam Speaker, that just given my own inclinations around money, I always, when I was out of government, before I arrived at this House, I certainly thought it was probably something important for governments to have a good, solid credit rating, just as I wanted one in my own life. I don't think I really understood the magnitude of the impact of that until I arrived here and was part of making some of the important decisions that we have to make each and every day, the important choices that are often very difficult. And Madam Speaker, the fact that we have been able in these economic times to maintain a taxpayer-supported debt to GDP that will peak at 18.3 and then start to decline to 18.1, the fact that we've been able to do that means that we can keep our borrowing affordable. It means that our credit rating remains intact. And Madam Speaker, long-term, that means our ability to continue the very important investments that we will need if we are going to continue to expand our trade, to grow our economy, to ensure that we truly can take advantage of the natural resources that British Columbia provides us as a province. And that wasn't always true. I think back to the way in which certain investments stopped in previous times when budgets got tight. In a previous government, there wasn't a single major road improvement project built on the Lower Mainland during the entire 1990s. In fact, the last one prior to 2001 was the Alex Fraser Bridge in 1986. And yet, it was a population that was growing at a staggering rate. Madam Speaker, we can't afford to make the same mistake. Just because money is tight doesn't mean that we can stop investing in these very important things. If we stop, we will not see the continued expansion of our economy, and as a result, we won't be able to achieve the kinds of outcomes that we are hoping to. It means that we've had to make choices around controlling spending. And Madam Speaker, I suppose it's part of the rhetoric, part of the verbal dance that we do in this House, but invariably, oppositions are asking, why don't you spend more on this? Why don't you spend more on that? Why don't you give more money to this agency, this department, this ministry? And Madam Speaker, as I've previously said, that of course is what everyone would like to do. I'd certainly rather be a transportation minister who's able to be out on a whim announcing projects all over this province that at this stage we couldn't possibly afford. But Madam Speaker, where would that get us? It would get us into places that we've seen other governments go. It would get us to a place where our debt to GDP increases and we have lost that credit rating. And then our ability to deliver for British Columbians is gone. Instead, Madam Speaker, most importantly, we are controlling annual spending growth to 1.5% over the fiscal plan period. And Madam Speaker, I would close by saying, for those who say that it's unrealistic, all you have to do is look back on the record, and I cannot remember a time when we've had opposition saying that we should be spending less on the things that we've had in our budget. In fact, Madam Speaker, we've seen repeated calls for more and more spending. We've said we have to spend what we need to spend. We need to find efficiencies where we can, and remember that controlling public spending is the responsible thing to do when what we are investing is taxpayers' money, and it is hard-earned by those taxpayers. So, Madam Speaker, I'm pleased to support this budget, pleased that it is balanced, and pleased to have the opportunity to speak about it in this House. Thank you very much.